Here. Paul?
Here.
Anybody?
Here. Okay. So you have also present. That's just for you.
Yes.
The Finance Committee recommends that the minutes of the March 12th, 2018 Board Finance Committee meeting be approved as presented, and we have not amended them. So.
Second.
Carter? Yes. Cohen?
Yes.
Anybody?
Yes. The Finance Committee recommends that the 2018 Summer Building Use Agreement be presented to the full board for approval.
Second.
Did anybody have any questions about that? I'm sorry.
I did actually have a couple of questions about
Okay.
the first question that I had was the reasoning for the city of Evanston and Skokie being able to use the buildings free of charge.
I think what it is, we have an intergovernmental agreement. They help us with a lot of things, just like they are getting ready to provide us training. They made the city of Evanston with the safety training, Alice, and they help us with a lot. So we have.
They do crossing guards.
Yes, they do crossing guards. They do a lot of things for us where there's no money that exchange hands. So we just have a good relationship, and we think it's important to build on that. Additionally, the children who are being served are our children anyway. It keeps them off the street. It's just doing nothing during the summer.
There's a cost to the services they provide. They just don't charge us, and this is the reciprocity.
Right.
Correct. And the intergovernmental agreement is there, so we feel very comfortable if we perhaps needed space or needed something, we would call it the city manager or call it the mayor and work through that. And we get lots and lots of support from Parks and Rec, the library services, et cetera. So it's in the cost benefit analysis of life, this is a good investment both ways.
Okay. That actually brings me to my second question, which is, what is the cost of us having the buildings that are going to be utilized? How much does it cost us to have those open?
Now, the few buildings that they're using exclusively, we have some of our programs in there too. So we have to keep those buildings open anyway. And we have to keep the lights on even during the time they're there. So it'll be hard to try to delineate how much additional cost it will be for them to be in there.
So it's not, the question wasn't specific to the city programs, but just in general, knowing that we're increasing the cost for non-governmental agencies to use the buildings, it would be nice to know what the cost that we incur for having those buildings open would be, so that we can understand what the net cash inflow or outflow is as a result of the programs.
Okay.
Or is that delineated somewhere else?
Isn't it true that, I mean, in all of our buildings during our custodial staff are there.
They're there.
So that's an ongoing cost regardless, because
Right.
during the summer, we're doing major cleanup. We're removing stuff from the rooms that aren't being used for summer programs and cleaning and buffing and shining, et cetera, and doing all the upkeep. So in terms of custodial service, which is one of the big expenses, which is somebody who unlocks the door.
Energy, too.
And energy is the other piece of that, but the custodians are in there doing their work. I mean, they're not.
Doesn't have to be on regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some costs that I will say, because it takes us that much longer to clean the buildings once they get out. We have to wait till all the programs are done. But even with that, though, if you look at Walker, for example, where you have Skokie Park District, have two programs. We have our program there too. And our program is actually at the same time their program is. So even if they weren't there, we'll still have those buildings open. We'll still have the lights on. We'll still have the custodian having to wait till after August 3rd in order for us to clean the building. So
if there is no marginal cost to utilizing our buildings over the summer, is there any way that we could get more business for our buildings over the summer? There are a ton of summer programs available for children. Is there any way would it be a benefit to the district to move more of that to our school buildings then?
we can look at it. But I think what we have to worry about, there's a fine line when we open up our building to serve everybody. And then it becomes, do we really want certain people using our building for certain things? Because they have to provide insurance. Will the insurance really be able to cover all the liability they expose us to, depending on what they're doing in our building? So even though we make our building available, we're very selective in what kind of folks that we get in there to do certain things because of the potential of liability.
Even if we had all rentals in the buildings over the course of a summer, it wouldn't subsidize the cost of operating the buildings over the summer anyway. That's not how the rental rates are set.
No, I don't think so. And I think we do want to be, it's an interesting question for us to consider. I think the other side of the question is we want to be careful about overusing our buildings in the summer so that our custodial staff and the extra men and women who help them can really do the deep cleaning that's necessary so we're ready to go. And when many, if not most of these programs that end on August 3rd, our
Yes.
guys and gals are working long hours to clean and buff floors, get the boards ready, do all the sort of spring and summer cleaning that needs to be done.
I'm struggling to understand about whether or not there is a marginal cost to using the building or there isn't a marginal cost for using the building. It sounds like, I'm just wondering if it would be informative for us to really truly know exactly how expensive or how much it costs for us to be operating our buildings, and if there is an opportunity or there isn't an opportunity. It sounds like we don't have numbers on that.
I'm sure we can get you,
Sure, you could.
we can get you a marginal cost. But I guess what I also want us to think about, there are no buildings that are being used by outsiders where we don't have a program there too. So the difference in the marginal cost will be, it wouldn't be much. So it's not like there's a building that we rent out to a party that's not affiliated with us. We have programs, we have summer programs in all these buildings. And what happened is the Park District just piggybacks on us being in there.
We also have 12-month administrators, right?
Administrators are 12 months, right?
So I'm wondering if the question is, what is the cost-benefit analysis without going into something really extensive, an extensive use of time, but of having additional private programs running alongside District 65 or partner programs that are in the buildings. Like if there was an additional private program added, would that create some source of revenue or would it not? Or would it be negligible or not advised because it would take so much additional labor in order to cultivate and analyze those relationships to make sure that they're the right ones. Is that?
That's what you're asking.
And I think too, there's been wear and tear on the building by having, at
Which is a
what point
cost.
is it too
Right.
many people in the building year round that it just,
And there's certain things, we make certain requirements on our partners that the folks who run the program have to be background checked.
Sure.
They have to follow strict guidelines that we require staff to follow. Now, if we were to allow everyone to use that, it gets a little tricky what you can require them to do because it becomes a commercial enterprise, right? So you can't say, I want your money, I want to make money off of it, but you can't do this. It's like renting an apartment to someone and saying, well, you can't have people over, you can't do this, you can't do that. And they'll be like, why would I rent your apartment? So the relationship, it's a little different with the Park District, for example, Evanston and Skokie, and compared to a commercial enterprise. So there will be additional cost to us, and there will also be additional exposure to us, because at the end of the day, if anything happens to our facility, we bear some responsibility. They will have insurance that will cap the responsibility, but we still bear some. So we have to look at those things. I'll be happy to give you the cost if you would like to, but I just want us to keep that in mind as all variables.
Why don't I recommend that we look at a couple of the sites here, because in the ideal world, any other program would piggyback a building that's already open. So why don't we take a couple and then run through what the analysis might be, and then we can come back and tell you what kind of lift that would be to do, and then what we might find.
So, for example, if we look at Kinsley, I'm just looking at that, and the other thing that I want us to keep in mind is that, what?
Okay.
Is that the kids who are being served are our kids. So if we don't provide them the access to use our building, they have to find somewhere to use. And they will be impacted by that. So if I point to Kinsley, for example, it seems like just about all the space have been used
So it's not feasible.
at Kinsley. So there wouldn't be an opportunity to get someone else in there if you look at Kinsley. Now, if we look at Lincolnwood, or even Lincoln, which is behind Kinsley, just about all the classrooms have been used. The lounges and the multi-purpose room have been used. So go ahead.
I was going to say maybe a different way to ask the question that could be more
feasible?
easily answered is, are there any buildings that aren't closed to programming because of summer projects, maintenance projects that are happening? Are there any buildings that aren't currently housing any summer programs?
There are none.
Okay.
Because
so there might not even be an
Right.
opportunity there then.
Right.
If you're saying that the ones that are housing them are probably full because we do have to close some of them because we're doing work.
And even some of the places where we're doing work, what we have to do, we have to make an accommodation and still use those facilities because the demand is in certain parts of the community, which is in the southern part of the community. So the organizations, they want to use Washington, for example, they want to use Oakton. And even though we have projects, they want to use King. So what we have to do is figure out a way to be able to complete our project while at the same time accommodating the requirement to provide summer programming for our students. So the capacity is a little tight during the summer.
So, and we'll have capital projects happening over the next few summers.
Over the next
Eight
5
summers.
summers. Yeah, 8 summers.
8 summers at
actually.
least.
Yeah.
So.
8. So I think the question is, again, just like if there are any buildings that have any additional capacity, what would be the cost versus the benefit of considering inviting private providers to utilize that space, and if that would be of any benefit.
I mean, the opportunity
but-
is only a few $100s a month per building.
Right.
That's obviously not worth anyone's time to even discuss that further. I mean,
Right,
if there's
that's-
no capacity, then that's another.
That's why I'm suggesting let's take a couple examples and see what we might yield, and then we can come back and give you more details.
So,
So,
yeah.
is that,
Perfect. Thank you.
does anyone else have any comments or questions? Okay, did we not vote on it? Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right, next on the agenda, the Finance Committee recommends the appointment of Raphael Opafemi, Chief Financial and Operations Officer, as District 65 School Treasurer for FY19, be presented to the full board for approval.
Second.
Does anyone have any questions about the memo?
Makes sense.
All right,
Yes.
Yes.
yes. All right. So next on the agenda, we have a budget update, and that is for discussion. We're going to, who's going to cue that?
So the work, tonight for you, we have an update on the FY19 budget. The work has started in January and February. The Finance Committee was presented with the financial projections for FY19 through FY25, and these projections guide our budget development. There are a lot of information. Major components of the budget, they are already known. We know the CPI for FY19, 2.1%, which will that's going to be our growth in the revenue, 2.1%. We also know the increases in salaries. FY19 will be the third and the final year of the debt contract. I also want to report to you that we know the increase, actually the decrease in health insurance for next year. It's going to be going down by 4%, which is approximately $300,000 every year. In comparison with our projections over FY18 cost. So that's really good news. There is a lot of unknown information, especially related to the state and federal revenues. Governor Rauner presented his budget. It hasn't been adopted yet. Based on the evidence-based budget for state funding, we should be getting the same amount of state aid, but we don't know what's going to happen with the pension cost shift that he presented. He presented a 25% increase of the total cost over the 4 years. Luckily, we had that amount included, slightly smaller amount included in our projections, but really for the last 4 or 5 years, we always had a pension cost shift built into our projections. We don't know what's going to happen with federal revenue. A new budget signed by President Trump calls for elimination of Title II, for example. That's $100,000 in revenue that may not materialize next year. We don't know yet. Information comes to us really daily. We keep updating our budget file. We are in the process of meeting with cabinet members, program directors, budget directors. We are implementing, again, it's been an ongoing process, a version of the zero-based budgeting for non-personnel expenditures. Raphael has been amazing since he started on basically reviewing all the contracts that the district has, looking for cost efficiency. So that's being done across the district. We also reviewing, and we're working with our consultant Afton Partners. We are doing a deeper dives into the budget to see where we can shift the money. And we're not talking really any budget reductions this year, but just to see where how much our programs are costing us, so we can reshift over time our funding to the most important priorities, spending priorities, and this is just beginning. We're going to be spending next couple months probably doing that. What else? So that's pretty much the plan for next couple months. We will be bringing draft tentative budget in June to you, budget on a very high level, and then in August a tentative budget, and in September final budget.
So one thing that I wanted to point out, we've met with a few departments already, and we're scheduled to meet with the rest of the departments by the balance of this week to just kind of review their budget. We've actually gone line by line, trying to have a conversation and a justification for each of the expenditure, and try to see the ways to achieve efficiency and not reduce the level of services that we're providing. So every line has to be justified, and we're having some serious questions about it. It's just the best way to do this. Can we do it any differently? Can we look at a different way of providing the services without it costing the same amount of money? Can we realign some of the expenditures that we have and see their ways? So we're looking at it line by line instead of just saying, this is what you got last year. You might get 2% more this year. You might leave the allocation flat. We need the reasoning behind it, the rationale, the justification, and the thinking behind it to see if there's a way to actually save in that line.
Yeah, nothing is being copied, and just we don't adjust for cost of living. Everybody has to justify, and it really doesn't matter that they had these expenditures last year. They have to prove to them that these expenditures are needed, and they are supporting our strategic plan.
So a couple things about that process. after Raphael and Kathy finish this work, they'll share this work with me. And we'll look closely at the strategic plan, look at some of our highest priorities, which are to improve student performance and outcomes, to focus and continue our focus on buttressing up our curriculums and our instructional core so that we can do the type of teaching that we want to have, to maintain and to increase our focus on equity. And as we move forward on the positions on Black student success, for instance, and some of the other equity work, we'll continue that. And to continue our really important and strong work on school climate and culture. And so this is a conversation that we have around the board table, and we're not letting go of that, but we're doing line by line analysis in the short run for this coming budget year. That just sets us up over the next couple of years. And I think, as Kathy said, we're not planning to make any dramatic changes this year, but I think as we look forward over the next 6 and 7 years, and we think about both the generosity of the taxpayers in Evanston who voted in the referendum a year ago, and to which we are focused on maintaining the resources as we've said, we're going to have to make some changes over time as we head into new bargaining season, as we head into new expenditures, so that we don't reach another point 7 years from now where we were a year ago or 2 years ago after the previous 15 years of having expenditures far outweigh costs. So the exercise, it's more than an exercise. The discipline that we're doing this year is the beginning of even greater discipline that we're going to have to take in the next couple of years as we manage the budget and manage the resources that we're asked to take care of.
Can I ask a quick question? Yeah. And you may not have the answer on the top of your head, so maybe it's for a future meeting. Given that, what I hear you say is that you're looking for efficiencies in ways to maintain services and support for children and programs without, while reducing some of the expense, right? How do we make the system less expensive? But I also hear you saying that sometimes the right thing for kids costs money.
Correct.
Including wonderful teachers, right? Can you highlight some examples of things that fall under this costs more but we have to have it side, as well as things that it costs a lot and maybe we need to cut, like those places where you find space and you make those decisions with department heads? Again, not putting departments on the spot, but when you talk to the leaders of these groups and they say, you know what, we can do without that. We can maintain services and support. It would be nice to see some examples of where you find those places to move.
Absolutely. And we're actually doing it already, and I'll give you an example. Our bilingual English second language population is increasing. And already we know that we will be adding 2 bilingual teachers. And again, they were not in the projection. So we are working with our program managers right now to accommodate that cost, but maybe reduce something else. And again, a budget is a big puzzle. Once you move one piece, then everything is out of line. So we kind of doing it with everybody to make sure that we keep our promise to the community and to you, the board. Don't change the bottom line, and we have that 8-year balance. But we are doing it basically every day when we meet.
So a couple more examples. One is the set that I just said. So at the core of our business, teaching is really good teaching. And so really good teaching requires really good tools. And really good tools require the purchasing of curricular materials and the training of our staff. So that sort of investment, on one side we can say, let's make some major cuts there. But then we're really looking at the instructional core in a different way. The work on social emotional learning and restorative justice is key as we think about safe and healthy climates for our kids to be going to school and our adults to be working in. So one by contractual obligation, which we were happy to do at the negotiating table, and then because it was the right thing, we added extra social workers last year so that we could do the planning time for our teachers, and we could also do the social emotional learning equity class and the coding class that we were able to do. So we were able to, again, we had a contractual obligation, so we fulfilled that, but we also fulfilled it by being on point with what our strategic plans directs us to say is the most important thing in the district.
And as far as the area of efficiencies that you were talking about, we recognize that we have to put investment in student achievement. We recognize that. That's not negotiable. But there are processes that doesn't hit the classroom directly that also cost money. And if we can manage those things, that will be helpful. For example, Kathy just mentioned the reduction in healthcare costs. We went hard on our current provider, and we decided we were going to shop out. They gave us a flat rate initially that our rate weren't going up. So we decided we're going to shop around and see if we can even do better than they gave us. Once we shop around, even though we couldn't do better, what it did is we were one of the largest co-op members. I think it made them nervous, and they came back and they gave us concession on pricing. And so the areas where we will be able to do some savings, see some savings that doesn't hit the classroom, is a purchasing process, because we have some wiggle room on that. Another area that we're focusing on related to that is the energy supply area, the electricity that we use, the heat that we use. We're going through aggregation. We have an energy manager, and we're pushing them to even come up with different ways to even save money. Even though it doesn't sound like a lot of money, if you think about the fact that we have over 1 million square footage that we have to heat and we have to light every day, there are things we can do to try to save money by trading on currently electricity prices at an all-time low, and we can try to get some savings on that. Those are some of the things that we are doing that doesn't impact the classroom. And another thing that we're doing, supplies, cleaning supplies that we're doing. We're still getting quality cleaning supply, but what we're doing is we're letting our suppliers know that we're out shopping for price concession. So if you've been for example, you've been charging us $11 a gallon more for waxes, and you think, you got a good deal, if we can find out and get a comparable wax for $11 less, and considering that we buy thousands of those every year, it adds up to real money. So those are the soft things that we're doing that doesn't impact the classroom, but at the same time, savings is savings. If we start to think about the fact that the average cost of a teacher in the district is about $85,000, so if we save $400,000, that's essentially for classroom teachers that can provide the support in the SEL area and the reading area, support area, that will help our cause.
One other way to respond is that we believe right now and this may change, 10 to 12 retirements that are coming forward. And we don't have, folks have to tell us by Monday. By Monday next week. So one way to manage those costs is to bid a fondue to the great teachers who've been here for a long period of time, and thank them very much for their service, and they're usually paid at the end of our pay scale, and then to hire somewhere in the middle, a little less than the middle of the pay scale moving forward, with an asterisk, and that asterisk comes from me, actually, and from Andalit Kalgati, which is that if we find a teacher who's so outstanding, who meets our priority needs, so this is somebody who has great skills, this is somebody that better diversifies our work staff, that we would be, we won't be so locked in to say we'll only spend this and we're not going to hire somebody that will advantage us for our strategic priorities going forward. We still want to be in that zone, because that's the one way to honor our retirees and then move on and save some resources over time. But we also don't want to be so stuck in that zone that we miss out on the top-notch candidates.
Awesome. Thank you for all those examples.
I just have a quick question. I was curious, looking at cost savings opportunities, it sounds like a lot of this is negotiating and getting additional bids where maybe previously we hadn't been getting those. Do we get multiple bids for all of our contracts? And, which ones are you taking a look at now? Is it like top to bottom, or just the ones?
Well, we're looking at the big spends. That's really what we're looking at. where we have more flexibility, such as cleaning supplies. We have flexibility there. Most of the time, it's green supply, and we have a lot of vendors who provide the same thing. So we can go there, we can kind of push on that. Another one would be the elevator contract, for example. And refuse removal is another one. Now, the refuse removal is not just negotiating contract, it's looking at how we use. It used to be we had more frequency of pickup of trash. And what we noticed is that they were being picked up, for example, every week, but they weren't full. So we're still paying for it. So what if we delay it and just wait till every other week? And when they're closer to 100%. And that's less frequency. So that would save us about $2,000 every week. So looking at those kinds of things operationally, how we can look at ways to save money. Those are some of the things that we're looking at. So we're looking at the big spends. We're looking at opportunity where we can get wins. And we're looking at if we can push on even people who provide the services right now, who we believe they've done well by us, but we need some help. We're talking to them, can you give us concession? If you don't give us concession, we're willing to talk to a third party to see if they'll be willing to give us concession. Those are the things that we're doing.
And often it's not a formal bidding process, and if it's technology especially, we are not, or a professional service, we are not required to bid, but just a phone call. And it's like the insurance is a good example. We just called a different provider, and because Blue Cross Blue Shield has to let the current provider that we are shopping around, they got the message, and I think that kind of pushed the renewal down for us. So it's just asking for efficiencies, for better deal will generate savings.
We all do it with Comcast and RCN all the time.
Right.
It's just,
Right.
let them know.
I do want to stress, though, the narratives that we all talked about during the referendum last year. One is that these sorts of reductions are absolutely essential. And however we can do what we can do, it's good business practice, it's fantastic financial discipline. That said, these reductions are in some ways on the margin in the whole enterprise, because the enterprise is about 80% people.
Yes.
And so when we're an 80% people organization and we want to be a thriving workforce, we have to actually think about those costs. And those costs are costs that we have to pay attention to over time. We pay attention to when we negotiate, and we'll be back in the negotiating season next year. And we have to really be as disciplined as Kathy and Raphael are talking about right now in negotiating contracts on the business side of the operation. We have to really think about our expenditures moving forward, because that's where, again, and Joey, your question is really spot on. It's how do we make sure that we're spending the resources to get the best and the brightest, the most engaged players across all job classifications into the district. But where do we save our money, and where do we have to actually make some bets to spend our money?
And because 80% of our expenditures consist of staffing of people, we'll be doing this month these deep dives into each program, including staffing. We'll be basically looking how much people are costing us, what's the allocation, why there are differences between programs, buildings, and so on. And again, this is just a whole new exercise that hopefully will generate lots of savings in future years.
Yet, again, really important financial discipline, and yet also remember that we only have 19% of our operating budget in our fund balance. We really should have between 25 and 40%. Remember that we, again, through the generosity of the voters in Evanston and Skokie, were able to do limited capital improvements of just over $1 million this year, and then the following 7 years, 8 years. But those are limited investments given the large scale work that we have to do.
Just setting expectations. You can go out to rebid or renegotiate contracts right now, but you can't do that habitually every year, right? I mean, you can, but to do it in good faith, you go back to vendors periodically to make sure that you're getting an honest and fair, right? So you're doing it now with X services and goods, and you'll do it again for X time, and you'll do it again at a different point in time, but we shouldn't expect this to be an annual endeavor for you.
Right. But what we can do, we can also be efficient in buying them.
Right.
Which is something else that we're looking at, whereas in the past we may have bought stuff and just let it sit. We don't buy stuff until we need it. And so there will be times when we end up not spending that money instead of just buying stuff and letting it sit in the warehouse. So there are processes that can be ongoing. It wouldn't generate the level of savings that we're seeing right now with the negotiation, to your point, yes.
I was going to ask, so going back to the negotiations not negotiations, but you're kind of digging in with the different department heads to kind of see what their budgets look like and how they can justify what they spend. So is there a framework that they work off of in regards to maybe student-based budgeting where, okay, well, let's say, for instance, the bilingual or ESL department, right? And, we know that a lot of times, the services that are required for English learner services are kind of double, they do double the work. My question is, is there a certain framework that folks are using, or are you just kind of saying, okay, well, tell us what you need and justify it?
So there is a framework to your point. We thought about doing a student-based budget for this year, but I think it's a little too early for this year because it's actually a system I'm very familiar with. When CPS went to student-based budget, I was part of the team that did the transition, did the training for all the principals. But we looked at it with Afton, the consultant firm that also I worked with when I was in CPS, but we just thought it was too soon right now to make the transition from where we were to there. But what we do is we look at the district strategic priorities, and we try to align the spending to that priority. So if, for example, the program doesn't particularly support what we perceive to be high priority, then we have to look at it and see if resources should be deployed to that. So resources, in looking at the line by line that we're looking at, we're trying to make sure resources are deployed to where the priority of the administration of the board is saying they should be deployed to. And that's the framework that we're using in doing priority-based budget.
The simplest framework is class sizes. So, if we look at class sizes and what we've promised to the community, and it's not an exact science in every classroom because every year can change. So we use those as a way of thinking about how to deploy teachers. We do the same sort of thing in English language services in terms of looking at the population, looking at the exponential growth, as Kathy said, of the EL population, and then thinking about how we do that staffing. And that's something that we're making adjustments for this budget, as we did last year as well.
Yes, correct.
Would it be fair to say then that we're also using like the equity tool, the impact?
Yes.
The equity assessment.
Right. So if one of the driving conceptual frameworks is, as we are committed to equity and as we are committed to improving the outcomes and the opportunities for kids, especially kids who come from families that have been historically marginalized and who live in Evanston, how can we put resources forward in that way? So that's also part of the line by line piece, excuse me. And that's also part of how I'll look at the budget as it's brought forward to me.
So we recognize our key goal is student achievement. That's what's driving us. And the question is, can we do it in an efficient way? That's what we are really looking at.
So this is kind of a more narrow question, but I think it goes to also just getting a better idea of the thinking that's going into the way the budget's being prioritized. So we talked about adding 2 new bilingual teachers. Is that for Bessie Rhodes, or is that in general?
That's in general. That's beyond Bessie. Bessie Rhodes, we are hiring 2 kindergarten teachers, and then for the kindergarten teachers that are moving, they'll land somewhere else.
Right.
So and that's not an additional
hire.
This
is true.
Right.
So I'm just curious, so if having additional teacher support is necessary, then is there an equivalent amount of administrative support to support their curricular, instructional, et cetera, needs at the administrative level, or does that stay flat, but the educator quantity increases?
It's a great question.
And we'll have more answers probably after Friday when we meet with Stacy and Andrew.
Arguably, I think your question is really fantastic because I'm going to answer it in 2 ways. One is, yes, we should probably increase administrative support to do the type of really rich work that needs to be done. And no, we don't want to add those extra costs on, which then loads onto already loaded administrators more responsibilities to cover what they have to cover. And so it's, again, there's this trying to be disciplined in this, and this is exactly what Raphael and Kathy are doing. If there's a additional 0.5 or 1.0 to help manage the work that's going on, yes, we absolutely want to do that, but that 1.0 over 8 years, counting everything else, adds up so much that we pull back. And that may have some service impact, but it also has financial impact as well.
So what we look at is agility. Can those resources be deployed in the classroom where they will impact the kids directly without having to build up, without losing the agility of the discipline that we're trying to do here with the resources, financial resources. So provide the kids the resources they need in the classroom without necessarily layering administrative resources, if possible. We can get the best result.
Well, I personally am glad that we're having the conversation kind of out loud, and I think that it warrants continuing. So, thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate the questions. These help us as we start to think about how we move forward on this process. So it's more than just a bureaucratic process. It's really a strategically driven process to use our resources in the best way possible.
One of the other things I want to bring up too is that, again, so when even certain instructional practices or approaches to instructional practice may save us money. So when we think, for instance, for special education, right, one of the best models or the best model is inclusion. So again, many districts still aren't practicing inclusion, which means that, again, students who have IEPs or 504s are to be in the classroom, in the general classroom, as much time as possible. And we're trying to move away as a field from pull-out. Right, because again, that socially isolates kids, and again, the research tells us that again, kids just don't perform as well unless they're included in a classroom. So maybe that's something to look at in regards to when the special education department have to kind of talk about it. Okay, so would a certain instructional practice save us money? And it goes with EL services as well. Sometimes there's pull-out when there should be push in, right? And ensuring that students are in the classroom at all times. So, and then what does that mean in regards to staffing that, right? And ensuring that, again, that staff member isn't overloaded if we adopt that particular practice. So that's just something to
I think your example is hitting exactly on what Anya just asked. I mean, so in this district, which was prior to our landing here, did inclusion. It was important. It was cutting edge work, and yet I'm not convinced we did all the right staffing and PD to actually fully implement in a way that was seamless. We have great educators who are doing really well. So the one financial question is, did we really resource that the right way? And then the second set of questions is, could we have really resourced it, or was that going to be such a constraint? And that's the arm wrestling that we're going to have to do up in our offices upstairs with you all as trustees and broadly with the community.
And I would just contend that I think it's really important that we have a public conversation about it, because there's oftentimes questions as to what we can do to improve in certain areas or grow in certain areas, or are we, being as efficient as possible in meeting our strategic needs. And if some of those restrictions are financial, then I think that it's important to be clear that there are some financial restrictions, and some of that has to do with the way the state funds education, right? And a lot of that has to do with the way our state funds education. But I think that it makes it more clear what we're working with as a community and our public institutions, and what our actual restrictions are.
That's right. Well, and so if the governor and the legislature goes through with property tax freeze, or goes through with shifting the pension costs, and just for sake of argument, that means we will be obligated to pay $400,000 more towards one of those lines. That's $400,000 more. That's, back to Raphael's point, that's a significant number of teachers or social workers or special educators that we would love to support, but we're going to have to actually shift those costs somewhere else. And those numbers on the margin are actually significant in how we move forward, because if the state and if the feds really do change their flow of resources coming in, that will have a significant impact on us.
Absolutely. I think that's why we have to be careful, especially with these savings that we know will materialize, like the insurance savings, and wait and see what happens with the other pieces, as you mentioned, with the legislature.
Right, so the best place for the insurance savings is to put into the fund balance, so that the fund balance isn't 19%, it's 19.2%, or whatever my rough math is, on the pathway to 25% of our operating budget, as opposed to saying, wow, we have $300,000, let's go higher, fill in the blank, fill in the blank, fill in the blank.
Yeah, because it may change tomorrow.
Yes. Don't go to the candy store yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have any public comments in regard to our discussion? You're invited to come up to the microphone if you would like. So, yep. So public comment is restricted to 3 minutes, and you're invited to join us here.
My name is Susan Blatz. I live at the corner of Grant and Gray. I spoke to Mr. Ubushemi a couple of times. One cost-saving measure that you could implement is get rid of the empty buses that go by my house every single day. Giant buses with maybe 10 kids in there. Go by, just routinely every single morning. Small buses also go by, and small buses could be utilized, or a large bus could pick up. You don't need bus 020 and 355 and 8 blah, blah, blah. I could give you all those numbers because I keep them, I notate them. You could have one bus pick up all these kids. You're talking about small cost saving. Well, there's what a small cost saving you could make. And while I'm making this point, they don't need to come up Grant and Gray. They are coming from a neighborhood south of McCormick, picking up children there. They pick up no children coming up Gray Avenue and going across Grant Street. They should be coming from the positive connections on Emerson, straight across, pick up the kids, go down Golf, and come up McDaniel. McDaniel is a certified truck route. Grant is not. They're going down Dodge as well, and they're going through neighborhoods, and they should be using the truck routes. Save the money. Take a look at this. Yes, it's annoying to analyze bus routes. It is, because you have to look at where each kid lives, and you have to look at who is picking up what and what time you have to leave. But this is a cost-saving measure that I would think that this district ought to take a look at. It's not going to bring you from 19 point whatever it is to 40%, but it's going to save you a little bit of money, just like buying fewer cans of Ajax will. And I, again, want to emphasize that Mr. Ubushemi needs to look at the routes that these buses take. They need to go across Grant, and they need to go up McDaniel, not up Dodge and then across, up through Gray, pick up no children, and then across Grant. And by the way, they routinely run stop signs, speed, and so on. So this is an important issue from my point of view for both of the reasons that I've stated. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
All right, did anyone have anything else for that discussion item? Thank you. So our next meeting is May 7th, 2018, and we have FYI items for folks to consult, and I adjourn this. Where's the clock? Sorry. I adjourn this meeting at 7:52.